What is up, everybody? Joe Everest, the fence expert. Now, if you're thinking about making your fencing project a DIY endeavor, there are 5 pros and cons you have to consider before taking on this huge backyard project. But before we get started, if you like the content, if you find it helpful or educational, it would mean the world to us if you gave it a like. Also, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. And if you do, hit the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you each week as we have new content uploaded. All right, wait. This is usually where I say, now let's dig into it, and we go straight to the intro. But let's do things a little bit differently. Why don't you take a minute and type in your top 5s below, and at the end of the video, we'll compare notes. All right, let's dig into it. This is Joe Everest, the fence expert. My family's been perfecting their way of building fence for over 60 years, 3 generations. While there's more than one way to build a fence, I'm here to share with you our way. All right, so as I said in the beginning, we're gonna do the top 5 pros and top 5 cons to building your next fence yourself. Let's start with the pros. Number 1, you're gonna save some money. As we discussed in previous videos, fence companies typically take about 10% of the total price in net profit. So say an average backyard is $4,500, you'll save $450 right off the bat. You'll keep the profit yourself. Another thing you're gonna do though, is if you're doing the labor yourself, you're gonna pocket the labor portion of that too, which could be up to 30%. All said, you stand to save about $2,000 on your average backyard project. Number 2, your project could get started quite a bit quicker. Typically in the summertime, fencing contractors are booked out 5, 6, 7 weeks or more. By doing it yourself, you save yourself quite a bit of time. Really, the only time you have to wait before you can get your fence started is the mandated waiting period established by your local utility locator. The easiest way to get in touch with your local utility provider, simply dial 811 if you're in the United States or Canada. Number 3, you get to select your own materials. Now, typically a pro for hiring a fencing contractor would be that they take care of this step for you. But by going the DIY route, you can select each and every component. If you're building a privacy fence, you can inspect each and every picket before it goes up on your fence. That way you know exactly the quality materials that's built throughout your fence. Number 4, you get to build as your budget allows. Typically when you hire a fencing contractor, their terms are half down and balance at completion. If a life event happens during the construction of that fence, you don't really have a lot of options other than completing the fence and figuring out how to pay for it. Well, if you're building it yourself and during the fencing project, life happens, a life event comes up, you can absolutely pause the project, or you can complete it sections at a time as your budget allows. So really you could stretch the whole fencing project over the course of a year if you needed to, if your budget required that. Whereas hiring a fencing contractor, not so much an option. Number 5 is absolutely my favorite, and it's creating those bonding moments with friends and family. Now, I get it. As a kid, I helped my dad and granddad build a lot of fence. And at the time, I didn't see the value in these bonding moments. It was menial labor and I was over it. But now, as I look back on those memories, I really cherish them. They meant a lot to me. And if I could go back and if I could ask my granddad, I'd have to think that those memories meant a lot to him too. So while your kids and your friends and family might not view it at the time as a bonding moment, you can really create some incredible memories. So one of the groups that watches my videos is fencing contractors, and multi-generational fencing contractors at that. I would love to hear your stories. If you have a bonding moment around building fence with your father, grandfather, or mother or grandmother, why don't you leave in the comments below, and I'll share mine with you as well. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, so we started things off with the pros, but every rose has some thorns. So now let's talk about the 5 cons to building your fence yourself. Number 1, the project can end up taking quite a bit longer to complete. Typically, those that are building the fence themselves have a full-time job already. So a lot of their hours are already taken up doing that, which means they're left to build the fence in the evenings and on weekends. Whereas hiring a fencing contractor, that's all those guys do. They work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week building fence. So when you think about how long it takes, how many hours it takes to build a fence, if you're doing it yourself, that could stretch out a little while. It could take a 1-week project into, say, a 1-month project. The second problem could be a lack of experience. Now, typically a pro of hiring a fencing contractor is these guys do this all day, every day. They've seen a multitude of problems that can pop up during the project. If you're doing it yourself, you might not have that experience. Lucky for you, there's YouTube and Google. There's guys out there talking about building fence. So hopefully the lack of experience won't be that big of a con. Now for number 3, the number 3 pro was you get to pick your own materials. The number 3 con will be the materials available to the DIY segment of the community might be lower quality. Typically a DIYer would have access to materials through Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, or a local lumber supplier, whereas a fencing contractor would have access to materials directly from suppliers. Typically they get a little bit better choice of selection. So the third thing to think about is that while you can choose your own materials, the materials you have available could be a lower quality. Number 4, you're gonna have to either buy or rent any tools or equipment that you don't already own that are needed to build the fence. For example, digging the fence holes. Are you gonna dig them by hand or use a piece of equipment? Either way, you likely don't have either the hand diggers or the mini excavator that most contractors use to dig the fence holes. And also, depending on what type of fence you're installing, there are typically specific tools made to install that type of fence. So you're either going to need to purchase the tool because they're not usually in rental supply stores, or you try to make do without it. Now either you have a tool left over that you can't use, or your fence could look like you may do without this tool, neither of which are a great idea. 5, there's no warranty. Or should I say, you are your own warranty. Now usually the benefit of hiring a fencing contractor is there will be some sort of warranty on the labor and materials. So if something unforeseen happens, you have someone to fall back on to make good on that. If you're doing it yourself, you are your own warranty. So if the gate needs adjusted, just call you. Or if a board needs fixed, just call you. The big thing is you have to realize that you will be responsible for maintaining the fence and making any sort of repairs that might otherwise be warranted by yourself. And there you have it. My top 5 pros and top 5 cons on building your next fence yourself. If you took me up on my offer and entered your top 5 at the beginning of the video, let's talk about how your top 5 and my top 5 are different. Also, if you think I missed something or maybe wasn't clear enough about one of my top 5s, be sure to enter that in the chat below. I love to interact with you guys and I'd love to hear your opinion. For now, I'm Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors.